So Ian, what did you find? I mean, did you do some research on the correlation between Vlad Dracula's actual life, his Dracula's life, and then Bram Stoker's sort of building of this mythos, this monster for his book? Did you get a chance to look into that, or?
Well, there's from what I've read that it's Vlad, his life story, as we say, is based upon is the creation of the book. But there
Right.
have been historians and researchers that have gone into and really studied
Yeah.
Bram Stoker's work within creating this book, and they actually say that it's only very loosely based on the Vlad story.
Yeah.
That there really isn't much more than just the idea behind what Vlad was that went into
Yeah,
the
and I
book
think the
itself to
name
create
mostly, like I
Dracula.
said, I think it really was the name that he used more than anything to depict his creature, right? I think that the name, I mean, because let's face it, it's a pretty cool moniker. If
Yes,
you're
it is.
forget that,
It just so
right?
happens to be.
The last name, Son of the Dragon, or
I know, isn't that epic?
right? So, and so it's a kind of, I mean, it's so fits with the time period too, right? That, that sort
Yeah,
of Gothic medieval, verging on the Renaissance. You've
right,
got all of these things that come together and create this myth, this man, this actual man who goes on to become this myth and this monster. What
right.
I find really interesting, though, is all the things over the years that have been tied to Dracul or Vlad Tepes or Vlad Dracul. Things like Bran Castle, which they market the heck out of in terms. I've got wine that was created in their vineyards. So I have
Wow.
this Dracula wine.
Are you
Yeah,
sure it's actually wine and not blood inside there?
I've never opened it, so I
That's a
don't
good
know. I
question.
haven't opened it. It's supposedly wine, as far as I know. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they're bleeding villagers in the nearby vicinity for
No.
fill their bottles. But I find it interesting that the myth has become huge. There was also a
Yes.
story, and I couldn't find any truth to this. So it's a story, historical story, that claims that in 1476, Vlad's head was actually dunked into a barrel of honey and shipped to the Roman emperor at the time. To actually at that time, I believe it was I think it was Murad II, who was in charge of the Ottoman Empire. And
Oh,
he supposedly received Vlad's head in this barrel of honey to preserve it, and then stuck it on a pike outside the entrance to Constantinople to
yeah.
let people know that he had, conquered Vlad Dracula and the Dracul family, and that, they were the big heroes of the day. I couldn't find any actual historical proof of that. I mean, it's going back 600 years. But generally, when things like that happen, they show up in documents or documentation. And I was not able to find anything to that. But it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But I think the mystery is, too, we don't really know where Vlad ended up. There's rumors
Right.
he's
No.
buried on an island by this little church, this chapel.
Right.
There's,
Nobody.
there's
I've
all
heard
these
that before. Yeah, that he's
yeah,
buried in some churchyard somewhere. That
some little
Yeah.
island chapel that his body was buried in, and whether he was decapitated or not, is something we won't know unless we really find his body, right? But I mean, there's all these other tales that go with it too, like his wife plunging to her death from the ramparts of the castle because she was so distraught over him losing his life, and all of these things. And again, there doesn't seem to be any real records for
I can't
these
seem to
things,
find
right?
that. I
These
couldn't
are
find anything about his
stories.
love life, really. Just more
No,
about
like
his
that's the thing,
political
right?
actions. Yeah.
We know he had children. We know he was married. But we don't really have a lot of records to say what exactly happened to Vlad himself,
Yeah.
outside of the fact that, he did meet his end eventually at the hands of the Ottoman, but we don't really know where he ended up. And that's just the thing. It seems odd to me, because if the Ottoman had actually ended his life, I would have figured they would have, yes, indeed, taken his head or his entire body back to Constantinople and made quite a show of it.
You would
Right?
think
But
so.
Yeah.
you would think that, exactly. But I didn't find anything to say other than that, moment of the head in the barrel of honey being shipped back to Murad II, so that he could put that on a pike in front of the gates of, the city, the entrance to the city. But it's a sort of one of those stories where I think it's taken on a life of its own.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just like it's
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
just taken on a life of its own as it's and even coming into the modern times. I mean, we are still talking about this man.
Here we are.
Right here we are talking.
Probably
about,
be flattered.
and who he was and what kind of person he was. We don't really know that, and that's sort of what I find interesting, is that we have a glimpse through his childhood, through his early sort of formidable years, and then we have a glimpse of, when he was with the Ottomans, and then we have these stories that just become larger than life in terms of, what he did in his country in Transylvania and, with the Ottomans and that. And I mean, you have to kind of pick through those things and look for what seems most plausible. Right? Like what seems more real? Do you believe that he put a dining room table, a table out into the field and consumed his dinner while he watched the Ottomans writhing on poles that, I don't know. I mean, it's quite possible.
It's
right?
possible.
It was considered a leadership tactic. It was considered,
right.
He was doing it deliberately to obviously
terrify
disturb
people
and terrify people into behaving. If they did that in one village, one person would run to the next and pass it on and say, look what he just did to this village. They're probably going to be a little pliable,
because it was while he was sort of going at the aristocracy. I think that this was mostly Ottoman invaders who had come in, that he was putting.
Oh, for sure.
But you have to think about this too, right? This is one man we're talking about. And so he's one man commanding an army of men. Mm-hmm. So Vlad single-handedly did not do this, right? This would have been a military effort, of course, right? This is not, Vlad is often talked about, but in terms of what we really see here, this was a military effort at that time to stop an invasion of people from another country. And I think that doesn't get talked about very much either, right? I was looking into how he was as a commander, as a general, if you want to call it, as someone who oversaw an army and gave instructions. And part of what I've read, he seems like he was indeed quite strategic and very, very brilliant in terms of what he set out to do. But I think that parts of what he did do failed him, as well as he, as things moved forward for him. He was captured more than once, right? I believe it was 3 times he was actually captured by the Ottomans.
Well, he reclaimed his throne about 3 times.
So
it must have been.
I mean, obviously he was taken as a young teen, right, with his brother and his father. But then he was captured, and then he was captured again. So somewhere along the way, he was let go or escaped. Did anybody look that up to see what he did?
I think he was let go. Yeah, he was let go. He was
He was
actually let go to go back
Yeah.
when his father. I did look it up. when his father
I
when his
know it,
father
right? But I
passed.
wanted to ask because
I did look it up.
it's so crazy when you think about it.
When his father passed away, which was in 1448, he was released to take his place on the Wallachian
Right.
throne.
So,
And
and that
yeah,
was the
his
first
father.
time when he was
Yeah.
a child. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again later during some of these, I don't want to call them wars, but skirmishes or
Battles.
battles, he was again captured and let go. It's like, I think
That's what
that
I
it
was
might,
saying. There's so many back and forths. There
well, it
was
was a
so
very
many.
tumultuous
He
time,
did
like I
not
said,
stop fighting even till the end. He did not stop fighting for his
no, he
country
didn't.
and
And
his
that's
people.
sort of the interesting thing with him. And I really can see how he developed into that heroic symbol for his people, right?
Yeah.
They needed somebody to stand up for them.
Yes,
And
exactly.
he was that guy. He was
He
the
gave
one
them
that,
hope.
yeah, he gave them hope. And he also was against that aristocracy who was, bleeding the I don't want to say peasantry because I don't consider them peasantry, the everyday
Right.
person,
Yeah.
dry essentially of food and whatever little bits of money that they were making.
Excuse me.
It was quite a harsh environment then.